Look, will you be absolutely genuine with me? No deception, please. I want you to do something that expresses you without the slightest deception.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Genuity Podcast. I'm kicking it off today. I'm here at Maxwell and our special guest, Dr. Mike Kuhn. Me and Mike actually go back quite a while. He knew my father, and he was one of the first guys that I ever heard talk about the paleo diet. And my dad, as we were just speaking about before we started, was always into like fringe health topics and what was going to be next in health and fitness and longevity and things like that. And I can remember, this is probably going back, I don't know, you can kind of give a little background, but probably like 15 years, I would say. I had already started to get kind of fascinated with a lot of this stuff. And my father and Mike would see each other all the time. And every day he would come home with something new. Like, I was speaking to Mike the Caveman today as he went by back then. And he was telling me about this. And I'm like, what? Like, it would blow my mind, and I'd search it up. And then sure enough, like years later, this stuff would get really popular. So I think today will be filled with a lot of, maybe hot takes and just really interesting holistic health and fitness and mindset kind of topics with Mike. So thanks for joining us. Before we get super into it, if you could, I personally, when I listen to people, I like to hear who they are and where this stuff is coming from. So if you want to just give a little background on yourself and maybe some of the formal schooling that you've done, and I think maybe even more importantly, some of the non-formal education that you've received kind of over the years, and where you started 15 plus years ago and where you are now, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, definitely. So, like you said, I've always been on the edges of the normal health sphere. I'm used to being the crazy one, looking at the world and saying, that's not how things really work, huh? And like you said, yeah, I met your dad. He was, he was ahead of the curve with alkaline water and the vibrational plates and stuff like that. And so
15 years ago.
Really,
bro?
At least 2010. Yeah, no.
way.
Probably a little earlier. I don't know when he opened that spot, but could be as early as 2005 is when I went back to doing Japanese jiu-jitsu. And he was renting a spot out of there, and we met, and we definitely clicked. We were on the same page there. So my dad was a naturopathic doctor. He got into that, had a gnarly hernia that told him he couldn't walk when he was in his 30s. He just wasn't having that. And I had stupidly bad asthma when I was a kid, to the point that 7 different pediatricians misdiagnosed me with cystic fibrosis.
Wow.
And so it was a situation where once he started getting into the natural medicine, he was like, well, maybe I could do something with my son. And to the point that went from having the inhaler and crashing out all the time to being able to be a semi-professional athlete, 3-sport athlete in high school, throughout from middle school on, martial arts the entire time. And we were able to turn that around. So I was always thinking something about that. So that always got me interested in health, in nutrition, herbs, different things like that. And then I went to school. I was going to go for physical therapy. That's a whole long thing, but the program that I went there for didn't actually exist, and a whole bunch of us were like, hey, you can like apply to a physical therapy school after this. And we were so jaded that I kind of fell out of it with that. I still like physical training, but it wasn't my passion anymore. And then in 2010, a guy named Rob Wolf had been working with a whole bunch of the same publishing house that was doing a whole bunch of MMA, jiu-jitsu, kickboxing instructionals. Like all the celebrities, like Anderson Silva, Randy Couture, BJ Penn, all have their own instructional books put out by this Victory Belt Publishing. And all of a sudden, this comes this guy, Rob Wolf, who has a book called The Paleo Solution. And he's actually called the Godfather of Paleo.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I'm very familiar.
Yeah, and cool guy. He actually just got his black belt too.
Yeah.
Beat me to it. Very, very upsetting. But Rob, he really was on the ball with something here. And with ancestral health, the idea that, hey, we all have different genetic backgrounds, we have different makeups. But at the end of the day, we still have a relative framework that builds off of. So maybe we should kind of go along with that. Maybe not all this hyper-processed stuff that's only existed since the 40s, since we started subsidizing everything. So that got the wheels turning. I was, at that point, just graduated my undergrad, had taken some time off, was getting into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, MMA more directed, for having moved out of like Japanese and traditional stuff. And so I was like, hey, let's try this for cutting weight. And then, hey, let's try this. And my health just skyrocketed, and I was able to cut weight to the point everybody else is struggling, sitting in the sauna, and they're like dying the whole way through, and I'm just cool. Like, hey guys, I'll see you at weigh-ins, and we're good. And at this point, I decided to go back and got my master's in clinical nutrition. I started working with a couple of different companies, Calton Nutrition, Rebel Health, and I was working as like a executive, like director of like research and stuff. So because I was in school, so I was really like dialed in on how to find all the recent stuff, and that then got me through to meeting a guy named Karan Krishnan, and he's got a company called Microbiome Labs, and that dude really inspired me to get focused on the gut microbiome. And this is before everybody and their brother knew,
This is
that
like
existed. Yeah.
Right, this is like 2014, 2015 range. And at that point, my master's programs, I was going to University of Bridgeport. They had a distance master's. I was very specific, and I chose them because there was only 2 programs that had both distance, because I was still wanting to fight, and had a curriculum that wasn't beholden to the AND, the American Nutrition Dietetics Association. So
they had their own kind of...
So that the AND is very much low fat, low salt, all the nonsense that is very much against ancestral, just the basic mainstream. And in order to do that, so if you go that way, you're going to be a registered dietitian, and you're going to have the ability to accept insurance. There's a lot of perks to it.
Right. But you're just in the system. You're just another person in the system.
And you're locked to it. And if you go against that system,
you get punished.
Which we've seen in the last couple of years, you buck the system, you're going to get hammer smack struck down.
So this is 15 years ago.
Well, it was about 10 years ago.
10
Yeah,
years
it was about 2014. Well, my master's I probably went in about 2012. So yeah, almost 13, 14. Yeah, wow.
Wild.
I forget how old I am. So at that point, we were looking at that system. I'm like, no, I don't want to go the RD route. I'm going clinical nutrition. That's the way I want. This program actually does have, they had classes in like botanical medicine. They had classes in, there actually were a couple of professors who were explicitly paleo at that point. And so it wasn't this taboo thing. So we went to that route. Once I finished that, like I met Karan through Rebel Health, and with him, it was so focused on the gut. I was like, yeah, no, I want to do this. This is what I'm interested in. And so I got accepted to my doctoral program from that same school because they just started. Like I was invited by the director to be part of the first cohort, and my dad was sick at that time. We can touch on that in a little bit if you want, but we were dealing with that, and so I didn't really have time to go into that first cohort. Go into the second one, ended up getting my doctorate in clinical healthcare is what it's called. They eventually had a nutrition route. I would probably went that way, but it just sounds so weird. Like clinical healthcare, what the hell is that, right? But it's just whole body, holistic, everything. It was a lot more in depth. And when I got accepted, it was for, my thesis was going to be on the immune system. I still like this idea as the general for the physical aspects of health, that there's really only one type of issue. It's immune dysregulation. Either you're going to over or underreact to something external or something internal, right? So if you're overreacting to something that's external, then you're having an allergy. If you're underreacting to something external, that's an infection. If you're underreacting to something internal, that's cancer. And if you're overreacting to something internal, that's autoimmune. So all 4 of those are just your immune system screwing up. You're getting overinflamed. You're having, a histamine response. There's a lot of aspects of that. I'd rather, again, going back to the whole holistic idea, the whole body thing, bring it all back together, regulate that. Don't try to over-suppress your immune system. Don't try to overstimulate it. Bring it back to balance. Like God designed us a certain way, I want to bring back to that. And so got to the program, got into there, and then that's when the Jordan Peterson phenomena started cropping up. Another thing that I was ahead of the curve. It's kind of, I was there. He did his book tour release of 12 Rules for Life, and I was at Hunter College the day it dropped. Like mine showed up on Amazon on my doorstep. I rode the train or drove into the city, met him, everything. So I had already watched like all of his lectures, and it was a whole big thing. And that pipeline led me down to Orthodox Christianity, and got real deep into that rabbit hole, and ended up changing my thesis to. They titled it fasting. Well, what I was allowed to get by was fasting and prayer in the resolution of diseases of modern civilization. Really trash name. What I wanted to name it was Orthodoxy and the Medicine of the Future. And then the subheading would have been, as far as the East is from the West, what can medicine or what can healthcare learn from Eastern spiritual asceticism. So, little bit on that. What we're talking about with Orthodox asceticism, we're talking about fasting, prayer, almsgiving. Those are the three benchmarks of it. Okay, fasting is both food, but it's also spiritual, and it's supposed to open the door such that you can both pray and give more alms. Alms being charity, right? So if I'm not eating
service,
right? If I'm not eating a steak, I'm not eating lobster.
Crazy, right?
If I'm not eating a steak, I now have enough money to be able to afford to feed my neighbor, to help him out, and so it's an act of love, both self-sacrificial, but being able to do it in other ways. It also, if you're a little hungry, you got a little bit extra energy in the gut that it has to get directed somewhere. So now we're going to direct it towards prayer. We're going to actually turn it over. And hey, I'm not feeling too great right now. Lord, please help me, kind of idea. So what I did was a comparative analysis between multiple different domains of. So for the prayer end, we did yoga, we did meditation, and then MBSR, which is mindfulness-based stress reduction. It's got like a Zen.
So for those watching, you're not talking about, it's not just going to a church and saying a prayer. This is the same as prayer.
Yes. So it is, but the church part is very important to Orthodoxy. And we can circle back to that too.
Okay.
So it's a high liturgy church. We very much believe it's the first one. It's the original. But to the point of the fasting part, or at this point still the prayer part, yes. So has a lot of external similarities to yoga. There's different bodily positions. There are aspects that you would, again, externally, superficially, similar to mantras. The most important prayer of Orthodoxy is the Jesus prayer, which is, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. There are physical ways that you do that, where you breathe in, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And to that point, there are levels that, again, from the outside look like yoga. So there's ways of using those both physically, but there's obviously a much higher important spiritual aspect. So for my thesis, what I was looking at was, let's look at just the physical. What can we acknowledge from this? And then let's compare it in terms of the similarities to yoga, because there's not really that much. So Mount Athos is like one of the holiest spots in Orthodoxy. It's an island in Greece. Only men allowed. Women can't even go there. And it's just monks who have been there for thousands of years, who are doing nothing but living for Christ all day, every day. And there have actually been some studies done on them. So I was able to cite that work and then do comparative, because, obviously I'm not going to, while I deny the validity of the metaphysical aspects of yoga, of meditation, all that, I don't deny that there are physical benefits. What that's going to lead to, I think, is a big problem. So for the purpose of the thesis, though, use them as comparative. For the fasting end, we looked at Islamic fasting for Ramadan. That's very similar. We looked at intermittent fasting, just the general secular. And we looked at the Daniel fast, which is a vegetarian type fast. Because for Orthodox, the way we fast for about 180 days out of the year. And
and is that like following the Sabbath and that?
So it's Wednesday, Friday for almost every Wednesday, Friday out of the year. Wednesdays when Christ was betrayed. Fridays when he's crucified. And then 48 days leading up to Pascha, which is Easter. It's the Greek word for Passover, but yeah. So Easter, right now, actually, I have one more day left of the Nativity fast. There's a fast in the summer that's about 2 weeks. There's a second fast a little earlier in the summer that's about 2 weeks. And so altogether, it breaks up to be 180 days. No meat, no dairy, no eggs. It's basically vegan plus shellfish. Now, I say all that just to bring that to the point. I have multiple videos about how bacon is a health food. Anybody who's ever met me knows that I am very big on bacon. I would eat it for every meal if I could. Steak, incredible for you. Eggs, dairy, all of that, very good for you. But it's about giving up a good for a higher good for a period.
All about it. I agree 1,000%.
It's literally the first command, and only in the beginning, commandment that God gives. Don't eat. Don't eat that apple. Everything else, good to go. Don't eat that one right there. Literally the first thing he says to us. And we can't follow that. So for me, again, all of this started to click. So that's what got me into that. More importantly, so a lot of people's conceptions of Christianity comes from a Western post-schism. So as far as we're concerned, again, I'm getting a little bit further away from just my credentials, right?
This is great. This is exactly what I want to talk about.
Fucking awesome. Bro.
So 1054 is when there's the Great Schism between the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox. A lot of reasons for that. Not really important for our purposes right now, but it breaks away. From our purposes, at that point, though, when Rome broke away, it got into a very scholastic mindset where everything had to be hyper-explained. Okay? And in that way, everything became legalistic. Right? So you cheated on your wife, you're bad, you're ontologically bad. Like, you're very, to your core, you're bad. Versus the medicinal framework, both of which are biblical, both of which are in the scriptures. You can have the medicinal and the legal. There's punishment, but that punishment should be rehabilitative. It shouldn't be just you getting beaten down. So the medicinal understanding of it, hey, we need to rehabilitate them. The person who's sinning, they're missing the mark because they're addicted. They are living for the flesh, living for the body, living for the world. They need to get brought back into community, back to God. We need to redirect. Like the Greek word for sin is hamartia, missing the mark. Okay, so I missed the mark. I need to return back. So there's an addiction model. So all of that, again, was just clicking in my head like, like this is what Christianity really is? Oh, sweet. Bring me in. And while I was doing that, I was literally, I was reading books. The Philokalia is like the gold mine of Orthodox spirituality. And for someone who me at that point was only an inquirer, like, there's a whole process to getting in. Like, I was still inquiring. I really should not have been reading that.
And so what is the Philokalia?
So yeah, exactly. It's the writings of the Desert Fathers, which is like the 300-400 ranges up to about 1400s. It's monks who were living out in like the desert and up in the mountains, and like different ideas about how to unite yourself back to God, like different things to do. It's basically like trying to give a baby like a big old jug of milk, right? Yeah, they can drink their mother's breast milk, but you give them that milk, it's going to destroy their gut. Like, they're going to have lots of problems. This is mental, spiritual, like the wrong food,
yeah,
right? So praise God that I like didn't go crazy reading that stuff. But from what I understand, I really shouldn't have been reading it. And I was quoting that for my thesis. Like, so I was going where I shouldn't have been going, theoretically. But to the point of that, did that, ended up getting received into the church and been Orthodox Christian ever since. And so that's like Orthodox health is my idea. From my head, there's a lot of things, whether it be the yoga, whether it be the meditative stuff, whether it be the fasting, there's different tools that have been developed around the world independently of Christianity. But I believe that they have their understanding. The universe only has one source. Like, there's a lot of things in even the psychedelic world, like all those different things, they're real. Like, all those things are metaphysically real, but what are they actually being directed towards? So if I'm going the yoga route, I'm directing my worship towards, a demon. And so those Hindu deities, they are created beings. They're not God himself. So you're going to get some physical benefit, but what if I take that and apply it to a better source? So yeah, definitely weird rabbit hole there, I know. But that was what I did for my thesis. And so in terms of what I like to do working with people, there's the physical level where it's just, hey, let's work with your diet. Let's work with, changing up your mindset. But then I'm not a guru. I want to direct people back I want them to find a priest. I want them to find a spiritual father in general for that aspect, but I want to at least direct them in that way. Like, hey, maybe check this out. Like, maybe if you're looking to improve your mind, your heart, your soul, where you're directed towards, maybe check out an Orthodox church is kind of where I'm at there. At the very least, that Jesus prayer is a good place to start. So
you're saying at this point you just feel so strong in your faith of how important God is that you would put that in maybe a higher echelon or a similar category as like diet and exercise.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I mean,
and this is kind of what the aspect of your thesis was, is how powerful prayer is.
Exactly. So even if you took it from just a secular, just a worldly perspective, the breathing exercises, the physical movement is going to have physiological benefit. You're going to have the mental and the dietary, you're going to have those benefits to your physical body. But I think there's something more important happening while you're doing it. And so that's kind of it. And I think that while you're doing that, so going back to the Jordan Peterson phenomena, the whole idea, and from the little bit I gathered, there's a crisis of masculinity is the big thing, right? So there's too many men who don't understand what it is what it is they're looking for, right? They're looking for something, and we fill it with money, with sex, with drinking, with overeating, basically everything that was the classic cardinal sins, right? The 7 deadly sins. Every one of those lands on something that you're trying to find in your soul, in your heart, when what you're really looking for is God.
Right.
And so that in turn, that noetic, so the nous is, if you read like Plato or like ancient Greek philosophers, they'll talk about the nous, and it's an aspect of the mind. It kind of corresponds to the rational thinking part of the mind. For the Orthodox, we believe that the nous is the eye of the soul. It's the eye. It's basically
like the ego.
No, even deeper than that. So it's the aspect. It's the organ by which we connect with God. So
Okay.
our brain, our brain's here, but it's not really there. It's not.
Right.
We understand. Yes, there's synapses firing.
Our consciousness.
Right. Where is it?
Right.
It's kind of there, but not really.
Correct.
So the nous, where our brain is where the energy is being directed to form thoughts. Our nous or heart is where it's being directed to have a greater metaphysical experience.
Gotcha.
Exactly.
Okay.
So when I say noetic, that's what I'm referring to, is that connection with God.
Okay.
So we're missing that noetic connection. We're missing that connection to that world. And before I came out, I actually did listen to your psychedelic episode. And so that's it. I think that when you go into that stuff, you are entering the noetic realm, but I don't know that you have the right toolkit if you're just doing it by yourself.
Right.
So, yeah. I threw a lot of stuff at you there.
Yeah,
so.
this is funny how this just came about right now, because we've been like edging on getting into spirituality.
Yeah,
And I think I resonate with a lot of what you say a lot, because I think I too went through so many of these different like schools of thought. Like I remember getting into paleo the first time, and then you brought up bacon. I remember getting into keto the first time, and getting into carnivore the first time, and finding fasting the first time, and finding cold therapy the first time, and finding gut health the first time. And every single time you say, oh, this is the thing. This is like the keystone that I've been missing in my practice, and this is the thing that's gonna like just make me superhuman. And then you realize it has like obviously benefit to it, but then you find something else that's really shiny, and you're like, oh, this is the fucking thing. Like, man, I was so caught up on eating like low fat, and I should have been doing this the whole time, and it just goes forever. And then I'm also at this place right now. I'm like, fuck, it just comes back to God at the end of it, and how we are, like you referenced, like a spiritual being having this human experience rather than the other way around. And our connection into this one source creator is probably more important than almost like I think we're in a simulation. So I think even to speak about food, it's like we're like eating, I don't know, like holographically almost, or something like that.
I will interject on that one. So that is a big one there. It's a self-refuting issue though. If we were in a simulation, you wouldn't know we were in a simulation. And because you wouldn't know, you can't actually make that claim. It's a logical non-contradiction. It's a non-starter.
I think it's a simulation all the way down.
I get it, right. So turtles all the way down. I get it, right.
Yeah.
So, right. No, I get that. But even then, to be able to have this conversation, to be able to do anything, there has to be something at the bottom of the rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's source creator.
Right. But so then from there, if it's just source, if it's just some non-personal thing, you can't actually have a relationship. And then once again, you still can't know him. That is the big difference between Christianity. It's an exclusionary religion, such that, no, it's not either or. It's I am the way, the truth, the life. That's it. Like, at the end of the day, if you want to have a personal relationship with that source, it's through the Holy Trinity. That's the way you know him.
Through the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit.
Exactly. So you can have that personal relationship because they are persons. Whereas most, again, the Buddhist religions, the Hindu, the Shinto, all of the polytheistics those ways, it still turtles all the way down. And here's the crazier part is, if you don't actually believe that, and that was a major part of my thesis, it was a major sticking point. I almost didn't finish my thesis.
If you don't believe that, meaning if you kind of have an atheistic...
So you can come to the realizations of knowledge. You can come to ideas of things in the world. Like, I can go and study this, I can study this mushroom on the floor. Or obviously not on the floor here, but you know what I mean. I can study on the ground. I can study this mushroom on the ground. I can find out all the intricate details of it. But while I can know these little details about it, I don't actually know the mushroom.
Correct, yeah.
Whereas, if you do believe that, you have a way of understanding it. He's the grounding for everything in the world, and you can have that personal relationship there. So, if you don't believe that, while you can come to different conclusions, you can draw logical things, you don't even have a grounding for logic itself. Because, like I said, it's turtles all the way down. So if I don't understand anything there, then what's the purpose? So like, I can study, I can learn everything there is to know about that mushroom. But if I don't even know the mushroom's real, why did it matter? If I'm just stardust, if I'm just there. No, you actually do have a purpose, and that's really the key. You don't need to keep searching for every little last, again, whether it's just pleasure-seeking, whether it's, I want to try and improve my health every which way possible, which, great. Like, you are still called to be a student. Your body is still supposed to be a temple. You're supposed to be called to improving yourself. It's always moving, and that's the big thing, too, is that it's not our spirituality, it's not oh, no, you were good, you get to go to heaven, you get to play some harps. You were bad, you're going to burn in hell. For us, it's more of a continual evolution towards God himself. It's continually getting closer and closer towards him, such that everything you're doing is either moving yourself closer to or further away. But it's not you were bad, you're punished. So the reason why I say with that growth there, I'm learning more and more in my development there. So I'm moving closer towards him each time. I feel like I kind of just circled myself there on that one. But
yeah, this is great. This is just, I just have so many things
I have so much experience of everything you're saying without realizing that I was doing what you were just saying.
Yeah.
But it always comes back, you know, and I'm interested in, I've been picking Taylor's brain. So I grew up Jewish and then just straight atheist. And then I've probably been into heathenism like the last, I'd say 10 years, and it saved me.
right.
And I invoked my gods. I do this, but I always, like, I had the miraculous metal tattooed on me through my grandmother. And, she grew up, my dad was Irish Catholic. And I always had belief in that. But like, I'm not that I'm scared to tap, but I'm just scared at 40 years old to start all over again. And then like, I feel like I'm turning my back on these guys. And I talk to him, and it's pretty much all the same energies. And then you go back, and it's like you were saying, as soon as you accept that you're going to know, you're okay with not knowing what you want to know, a little bit like trust. And then like that goes into going to the gym and eating better and feeling better and giving back. And next thing you know, a year goes by and your life just went tenfold without even realizing it. And, you sit back and now, what's the one thing you're most grateful for? And it was whatever higher power, and then, I got 5 kids, 4 full time. And I wanted to start like getting into religion, like a Catholic religion, and they took me to this. It's called the Community Church.
Okay,
it's right down the walking distance from my house. The fucking priest is in a hoodie and sweatpants. I mean, it might even like jeans. And what was awesome is I already have anxiety walking in there, but they start off with like, listen, if anyone's here not Catholic, it's cool. Like we're just gonna, and then they'll even say something like, for example, the one service we went to was like about envy. So every time he would give you like a life lesson, he would say, all right, well, for just a normal person, forget religion, this is an answer. But for all you Jesus lovers, here's a little extra in the Jesus world. And like, it just made more sense every time he talked about the Jesus level. And they weren't stuffing it down your throat. And, it's hard for me to go into somewhere. Like I can't even wear a professional jersey because I refuse to put another guy's name on my back. Right. So it's like, hey, I'm going to give you no proof. I'm going to, I'm just going to go by what you were told when everything in the world is upside down, especially in Western civilization. And I'm just going to trust that this guy did all this. And I'm like, I can't do that. And I went to this church and talking to him, and he talks about that. I'm like beyond fascinated with that book he talks about where like he leaves at 13.
This is the lost. I don't know what the name of it is. Nicholas Notovich. It's like Jesus' lost years, something like that.
Like when he left and came back and like learned everything that made him Jesus. Like that shit has been like blowing my mind.
So to him, I'm like, yo, forget about like all of these belief concepts of like the virgin birth and the resurrection and things like that. I'm like, Jesus, all of Jesus' messages were so special and beautiful, and he just really wanted to bring you closer to God. I'm like, don't worry about. And he was like, oh, I can believe in that. Like, if it's just about spirit, and I can believe in the Holy Spirit. I'm
big on validation too. So like one of my workers goes to Brazil, which is a very in the area they're in, it's really not a big Jesus. It's more other things. And like this witch walks up to her and it's like, hey, you need this. It's a Jesus bracelet. And she's like, what? It's like, who it is? And like, it's 3 knots. And it's, but like when stuff like that happens, I'm like, all right, it's just smacking me in the face now. And I really enjoyed the church session. I try to go every Sunday. Something I can bring my kids, something I'm proud for my kids. But I think that people, especially in this podcast, a lot of people our main group is the guy who like just tried killing himself or lost his kid or went through a divorce, and like instead of speaking about like, oh man, I could relate to you, fuck you, get over it. Now you're over it. You're watching the podcast. How do you better yourself? And everything you're saying is just another person at a much higher level of intelligence circling everything together. Again, the last thing I thought we were talking about was fucking spirituality on this.
Agreed.
So I'm like mind blown because I could relate so much, and like I want to get. It's just crazy how you even with the fasting, like it just makes so much. That changed my whole life. The fasting.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And so that's really it too, though. Is like with fasting, right? So what am I fasting for? Right? Oh yeah, I want to have abs. I maybe want to add extra 2 3 years.
It's the sacrifice part of it that I do it for.
He's right.
Yeah.
But like, what's the purpose? And so that's where it comes down to is like, no, I'm sacrificing for Christ.
Right.
So like, it's a lot easier where it's like, no, you did a lot worse for me. Like, I'm going to try and return the favor a little bit. True, and nothing I ever do will be enough. Yeah. That's a big difference too. So like, there's a big difference between Protestants and Roman Catholics, right? Where it's like, oh no, you got to, that's the big argument against Catholics. Like, oh, you have to earn your salvation. You got to fight. You got to do this. And like, whereas, nope, just faith. But what does that faith mean? So the word faith in Greek, it should be better translated as faithfulness. And what is that faithfulness? It's the praxis. It's the way that you're actively acting in life, right, in the world. So are you actively going out there and doing good in the world, right? So the fasting is a way to increase my means to be able to help others. So am I showing them the love? Am I actually still giving everything back up to God? So that's where those things, the 3 pillars, the fasting, the prayer, the almsgiving. And that's the other aspect of it too. Again, trying to get too deep down, like, I'm going to beat you over the head with the Bible. But Jesus doesn't say if you fast, it's when you fast.
Right.
So, and that was, going to my thesis, that was a big thing, was that, no, every culture has fasting there. Because, so, going down different rabbit holes strings I didn't expect to pull, but I'm going to pull some of them. So, most modern theories on how religion developed, right? Oh, well, maybe we ate some mushrooms and there's a stoned ape theory. That's how we got our brain. And then we started, that's the fringes of that part. But my point is, we were polytheistic and then we were animalistic and then we started to worship a whole bunch of gods, and those all coalesced into a couple of, individual stories through Zoroaster and through Judaism. And then that developed into Christianity and Islam, etc. It's, from our perspective, it's completely reversed. So everybody had an understanding of that one true God. Even the Native Americans have a great sky being, right? So, and they were as far away from, the Abrahamic religions as you could possibly get. So it's an understanding that was lost over time. Those other gods, small g gods, those are real beings from our perspective. They were the angels that were put over the nations. They were meant to help direct those particular tribes and people back towards God. So yeah, they were supposed to at least have some level of role in those lives, but they weren't supposed to be the ones who were receiving the worship. So I'm not supposed to worship the tree, but the tree is supposed to tell me that God exists, right? Every level of that shows me there's something to this. This isn't just random. Like, there is purpose. There's telos here. So with those different beings, so the fact that it was reversed, my point on that was they all have aspects of the truth that are directing you back towards him, but those little lies got thrown in by those demons in the process.
As well as, would you say, through people? Yes,
exactly. We are made in the image of God, right? So we're supposed to be through other people, supposed to be directing ourselves back to him. That's kind of the idea there.
My take would be, and you could tell me how you see things from, but my take would be kind of mentioning before that God is one source creator. It's everything. It's the manifestation of all material and non-material and every thought and everything. And we're experiencing each other through God, because we are God. God is everything. It's. I mean, you could use the Christian like Father, Son, Holy Spirit, but I look at it. I think source creator is an easier way for me to kind of perceive it, because it's kind of like code shows up through math on earth, and through music and through color and through shapes and sacred geometries and things like that. And for every code, there's like a source creator, to the code. So I think that's an easy way for me to kind of grasp like the concept of God, rather than. And it's funny you brought up Jordan Peterson, because fuck all the health talk for this. We're already here. You might as well go there. When you brought up Jordan Peterson, like fairly recently, this is a couple months ago now, he posed like a thought of, when we argue about God, and this is something that I really like about him, it was like, let's figure out what we're really arguing about, because, like this guy, which was me, arguing about the sky God is not it's not really like encapsulating the argument that we're trying to make here. It's making something too dumb, and you're not even arguing about the same thing anymore, So he said in the book of Abraham, God was like the call to adventure, and so that's what God was in that scenario. And whether it came through a voice, or a lot of times in the Old Testament, it's through a voice from the sky, or maybe through a vision, or through an internal.
The word is a theophany, the appearances of God. A lot of times, so it's hard to derail you on that, but actually, that's where it gets interesting.
Like there might not be anything there is what you're saying.
We believe that the people know. No, it's okay. So Abraham specifically, at one point he goes, and it's called the hospitality of Abraham. It's a big thing for us. There's 3 people show up to his house,
right,
and they offer him a meal, right? 2 of whom are explicitly identified as angels, and they're told not to bow down to him. The third one is allowed to be bowed down to. He's allowed to receive worship. So for us, that's an example of the pre-incarnate Christ. That is Christ there, right then.
Do you think that Christ, just to derail from this a little bit,
yeah.
do you think that Christ was a reincarnated being that was also Moses? And no, he was unique.
So, man, didn't expect to go deep into the Orthodox theology.
This is
today.
like what I live for
please.
right now. So this is a cool conversation.
Okay. So for us, God is 3 persons in one essence. Okay, we believe Western Christianity, Roman Catholics and Protestants have that flipped. Okay. They believe they start with the person with God himself as one. We start with God as 3. However, the Father is still the monarchia. He's the head of that 3. So, like I said, deeper rabbit hole than I expect to get down. But when you start with nature of God versus the persons, you don't have that same relationship there. So, for us, God is the Father, unbegotten. Jesus, the only begotten Son. Begotten meaning, and I'll give you an analogy for that in a second, meaning that he came from the Father, but he is still the Father. The Holy Spirit is proceeding from the Father. What exactly that means, how that's different than begotten, is not something that we can logically understand. It's metalogical. But it's something that's received through the church, through revelation. So, the analogy there is, so Adam's created, right? He's the firstborn. Then Eve is begotten from Adam's side, and then from there it goes proceeding down. So uncreated to the begotten to the preceded. So there's 3 levels there. All 3 of which, though, because they are persons, you have the personal relationship with them. The Holy Spirit leads you towards Christ, and then Christ is, as the direct image of the Father, your ability to have a relationship with him. There are multiple times in the Bible where it talks about you can't ever see the Father, and we believe that. When you are seeing something that is, so Moses goes up on the bush, right? Because again, Pearson did go through his whole Genesis and Exodus series, so you might have some familiarity with these. So he goes up, and Moses asks to see him by face, and he says, "No, you'll die." But he's able to see his backside. Once again, we're seeing the times where he does. A couple of seconds later, he goes into the burning bush and sees the face of God. Was that a contradiction? Was for the last 6,000 years that the ancient Israelites were transcribing it to the point when Christ became man and transcribed it, so either the Jews and the Christians, every single one of them saw that and was like, two chapters later, like, oh, well, we should probably fix that, right? They didn't. Why? Why was that left in? Well, there's ideas in the Judaic thought where it's Metatron, and there's different aspects. It's an angel. It's a created being. For Christians, we believe that actually is a representation. It's a theophany. Theo, God, Phany, appearance of. So it's an appearance of God in the Old Testament, and who is that God is Jesus Christ. So it's him. So time is both linear.
Everything you're saying makes sense for someone who knows nothing.
Right.
It makes sense what you're saying.
So time is linear, right, for us, because we are created beings. But time is also circular.
It's a Mobius strip.
So yeah, so there's fractal patterns to it. Yeah. So we call it chiral time. There's references in the Greek, in the New Testament, where you're talking about that linear time versus, a time in this current moment versus something that's eternal. So the linear time and the chiral time, Christ comes into temporal time on that linear timeline at a certain point in creation.
The 0 point.
Right. But he was the lamb slain before the foundation of the world. So he was already incarnate because he's not bound by time. He is metalogical. He's above our conceptions of time. Chirally, he was there. And so to that point, he's able to be there in the Old Testament because he was always, before time, he was always with the Father as the express image of him. And so, circling back to you were talking about the community church you go to, and as an entry point, that's great. Anything that's going to lead you back in that general direction, for my purposes, awesome. Peter said, I grew up non-denominational. My parents were Catholics who left and became born-again Christians. I grew up in a, me and my Bible alone kind of household. And I think that's great to a certain degree. But you need that actual structure. You need something, you guys, if you're entrepreneurs, you need to keep to a schedule, right? We're here. We need to actually be on to something. We need something to direct ourselves towards. So that structure has to be there. And same kind of thing you were saying before about my American values of, I ain't going to put that man on my shirt. I'm not going to kneel down to nobody, I get it. I've been there. I have my libertarian, super face of it. But reality doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
At a certain level, if your kids wanted to behave that way, right? If all 5 of them decided one day we're going to have a nice little Bolshevik revolution in the household, all of a sudden, the monarch comes striking back down again.
Right.
And that's really what it is. There's still an order to life. And so
that's what saved me, bro. When you, I don't care how badass you are, and dude, I know some bad motherfuckers, and they'll talk about Jesus like they're boys. You know what I mean? And it's been growing up that way, and even in the heathen route too. There's some guys that are some bad dudes, bro, and they really believe in these invoked gods. And I remember invoking them for the first time, and just crying, and real crying, snot touching the floor and my nose at the same time. And you don't know why you're crying. I'm not a sad guy at the time. And you feel this spiritual lift. And from that moment, I remember, I can talk about this for hours, but to get back quick, I remember I needed validation because the hardest part I think about this, someone who's not Catholic, right? Or just a Jesus, or someone who's there's 2 things that I have a hard time with the religion is, and you kind of just answered it, is, what happened before 2025 years ago? The guy, why is he so special then? And second is the whole virgin, if you're into proof, what kind of proof is there? And and then you kind of get so grateful. So then you get some validation, some things happen in your life, and you're wow, okay, maybe I'm lucky. And then something else happens, and something else happens, and then you find yourself in service, right? It could be giving $1 to a fucking homeless guy, up to giving a whole family a turkey dinner for $1,000, and anywhere in between, or giving, instead of throwing out your clothes, giving it to someone that you know, and it just unravels, and then it all comes back into each other. And I used to get worried that they weren't happy with me, right? And they had this I'm a little bit more spiritual than religious, and they had this vibrating bed, right? I'm big on crystals and that type of energy, and I go to this bed. It's a 60-pound vibrating heated amethyst bed with all these chakras, and you go in there with a manifested thought, and then you pray or meditate on it for 45 minutes, and you could pick the hertz of what song you want to hum to see what chakra you want to work on. And dude, this isn't 1 or 2 times. This is 15 or 20 times. And I would walk into these, and one time fucking Jesus came, and they would just come in with these messages, and this woman just sat with a notebook, had no idea what your manifested thought was in your head. And I would actually say to them, are you proud of me? Are you proud of me? And it got to the point one time where their answer, I go into this 45-minute meditation. She doesn't know anything. And all she wrote down, I remember her saying, if you keep asking, they have your back. And if you keep asking, they're going to show you what it's like not having your back. Just give your gratitude and keep doing what you're doing. And what was I doing? I was fasting. I was controlling my diet. I was being a good father. I was worrying more about supplying for my family and giving back to the community. And then you have everyday life that just comes and goes. And then, so I start using, I'm big on 13 months out of the year, because if you go by new moon, full moon, it's exactly 13 months of 28 days. So that's when I started using that as my stopwatch, or alarm clock. So no matter what, new moon came, and I was going to create a manifested thought of what I was going to sacrifice for that month. What extra can I show them? What extra can I do? And then every full moon, I close out that month. I show gratitude for this and this. What can I work on? And then the next, I've been doing it for years now. And some people think I'm batshit crazy, and I'll bring them. I won't do it in my house. I don't want their energy in my house, but we'll go to like a field or the woods, and I do shit with them, multiple people. I've never done it with someone who, like, oh, that was crazy. Like, I've seen people destroy their lives because once you get into that field, you can't fake it. Like you said earlier, like, you are who you are. And I had people who went from making $80 a day to 50,000 a week, like that, you know, and it all is based around your faith. And it's the only thing that you could admit that you don't know what you know. And as soon as you check your ego, and then it even gets higher than that, I think that's how you start. And I just think it's interesting. All the questions I would have asked you, you're answering as like, even like an atheist, of like, well, what is this? And then you talk about it and it makes sense. And again, someone looking like, well, he's full of shit. But coming from someone who went through it, I never talked to you a day before this podcast. And all the questions, I specifically asked Taylor to like run this whole podcast because I was so overwhelmed with so many different avenues of thought. And you're literally just answering everything without me asking it, and it makes so much sense on where just to start. And
that right there will be an example of what we would believe would be the Holy Spirit.
Right.
That
is the Holy Spirit.
I'm the avenue that's being used here, not because I'm holy. Let's be very clear on that. So, like I said, what's the most important prayer that we use, the one we repeat on, like, it's not a mantra. It's not a vain repetition. It's not, I'm just saying that for the sake of saying it. It's like, no, it's like, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And I understand that, right? So another part of that, so we are a high liturgical church, so we do receive communion, and from the time they were babies, I got 2 little girls, from the time they were 40 days old, they received communion, because we actually believe that we are consuming the body and blood of Christ, right? So every time, though, before we take communion, we're told, or rather, we say it back, everybody in the congregation repeats back about, God came to save sinners, of whom I am the first, right? And again, going back to the health aspects of it, that's kind of where I came in initially too, was that he's the physician of soul and body. That's another part of it, is that God didn't come to save those who are well. He came to save those who are sick. That's a big argument, especially those who are more egalitarian minded, who are like, oh, well, Jesus was hanging out with the prostitutes and with the tax collectors, those were like Rocky Balboa style tax collectors. Those were knuckle breakers. They were hanging out with all these people. And so, yeah, he was hanging out with the sinners. Yes, because he was trying to bring them home. He was hanging out with those people. So God came to save the sinner. So he's using me in this moment for that perspective. And in every other conversation I have that's related to this, not for me and not because of I'm anything special. But, yeah, it's one of those where we believe that's the area. And again, going back to Bible thumpers, it's a big thing that people get concerned about, right? Where it's like, oh, well, you don't believe what I believe, so you're going to hell.
Yeah, I can't stand that.
I love that you brought that up before.
I've had that many times.
That was a big thing for me as well.
For us, okay, the Orthodox Church is the normative means of salvation. We believe the only way to the Father is through the Son, okay? That's the only way. You have to unite yourself to his mystical body. We believe the normative on this earth version of that is the church. However, that does not mean that God in his infinite wisdom and mercy cannot do so outside of it. All right? And even so, again, there's some people like, oh, well, the Holy Spirit can't act outside the church.
Yeah, another big thing for me, because I'm like, 3/4 of the world is not Catholic Christian, so what happens to them?
If he can't act outside the church, then how are they getting there? How's everybody showing up?
Right.
So actually, the New York Post had an article about 2-3 weeks ago about there's a huge influx of Orthodox Christianity. People are coming into the church, and it's very true. Our churches are exploding.
It was Orthodox, Greek Orthodox.
So Greek Orthodox is a variation. Yeah. So
because West Babylon has one that's a Greek Orthodox. That is
actually where I was received. So Father Demetrios, amazing.
My kid plays basketball with his kid.
Oh, perfect. yeah.
I see him every basketball game.
So yeah, actually, so my godfather, Constantine Dino Topsidikis, probably I always butcher his last name. I can't pronounce Greek, man. Sorry, Dino. So he's another guy from the Lima world, from Long Island Mixed Martial Arts. That's how I met James, and that's how we ended up here, right? So, yeah, he goes to that church. So I was received in the Greek church. Down in Arkansas, I attend a OCA, Orthodox Church of America. We're not affiliated with the Russian church. There's a whole long thing. But every single one of those churches, for our perspective, while there's different flavors, The hymns might be sung with a certain cadence that's a little different. But the actual structure of the liturgy, identical. I can go to St. Nicholas in West Babylon. I could go to St. John of Chicago down in Arkansas. I can go to California. I can go to Serbia. I can go to Lebanon. And depending on the day of the year, it's going to be the exact same service.
Really?
Yeah, the homily, the sermon is going to be different because you have a different priest who is embodying Christ in that moment, who is giving it. But Spirit's work, we believe the Holy Spirit's working through them too. Now, again, it's not Pentecostal. The Holy Spirit's going to get called down onto me right now, and I'm going to speak those words. The big problem with that is, what if what he's telling you over here is different than what he's telling him over here?
Right.
How do we know? It comes back to that normative authority of having turtles all the way down. Well, source told me this. Source told me that. Well, no, there is a normative authority. There is an actual revealed truth that we have to submit ourselves to, that reality is going to submit you to either way, whether you choose to believe it or not. Right? The analogy I love to use for that, I used in my thesis, is you can choose to not believe in air, but whether you breathe or not, it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Whether you actively choose to breathe in air or not, it's still there. You're breathing it, and that has to have a reason. Jesus and the Holy Trinity is the exact same thing. Whether you choose to accept him, believe in him or not, is irrelevant. He's there. So going back to you were saying how you believe that everybody is God. My issue there is that we are created. Okay, we are not God because we are created beings, and that's the big distinction. I think I started to go that way and kind of squirreled on a different string. So the only uncreated things are the Father, Son, Spirit. Everything else is created. Everything else, all those other small g gods, the Elohim, those are all aspects of creation. And yes, we all have the same source. We're all held together. We are logoi, Logoi in Greek. We are aspects. We are seeds of the Logos, big L, Logos. And we believe that the Logos isn't just a thought, it's a person. And sidebar on that, Logos is just, study of, right? Knowledge of things. So that's biology, biologia, right? So Logos, we don't think it's a what, it's a who, and it's Jesus Christ. And so he is, the thought wills of the Father are the foundations of all the world. And we believe that, right? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. Mm-hmm. And the Word spoke into existence. So cymatics is a real thing, right? So sound vibrations, you talk about your crystals and all the different sounds, different hertz and everything. Cymatics is a real thing. And they will, to explain that real quick, it's basically that the vibrations will actually change the way things are. So you can put sound waves next to water, next to ice, and it'll
change it differently. Yeah,
right. It'll change the structure of it. So the Word spoke creation into existence, but we're not uncreated. We are still beholden to that. So he is the uncreated. We have to submit ourselves to that, but he doesn't want slaves. Okay, he wants children.
Which is where free will comes into place.
Yes. And so we have to choose that. Mm-hmm. And so going back to, again, I'm a father. Do you have any kids?
No.
Okay. So, right. So you have your father. So you want your kids to behave a certain way, do certain things, make certain right choices, but you're not going to necessarily beat them into it.
Right.
But if they go the wrong path, if they misdirect, if they miss the mark, if they sinned, you're going to turn them back to the way they should be going and keep them on that track again. And that's really it. So again, wasn't expected to be quoting Bible verses the entire time. I figured a little bit would come in, but narrow is gate, but wide is the way to damnation. So narrow is the gate to salvation, wide is the gate to damnation. And so the idea is, yeah, you can go a lot of different paths in this life, but not every one is the correct path. And so every time you steer off, you need to redirect yourself back in. And that's goes back to what the fasting, the prayer, the alms is turning yourself away. Yes. So we're talking about the ego, humility, humbling yourself. So humus is Latin root, means dirt. It's actually lowering yourself into the dirt, right? And so I was talking about how there's like the physical similarities, like superficial between yoga and everything. There are positions where we bow down into, and that goes back to the ancient Israelite religion, right? Ezekiel and Elijah, there's a situation where they're bowing, they're prostrating themselves, they fall down on their face, they're covering themselves in dirt. You talk about Catholics. Catholics do the Ash Wednesday. We don't do that, but different conversation. Point is, making yourself understand that you came from dirt, you are dirt, that everything you have, no matter what you do, will never be good enough to be able to overcome your fallenness mistakes we make.
So
But
crazy.
through him, through his mercy, through his grace, through his love, that's your child. We're his children. He wants us to do right. And there are times where they will piss you off to no end, all right? Because God willing, you have kids someday, you'll see it, where you're gonna want to say you're gonna want to send them off, but then you're like, no, but I love them too much. And if you think you love your kid, how much more could the person who created us actually love us?
Just one more little fuck.
Yeah.
This gets weirder and weirder. So when I first invoked what I did spiritually,
Yeah.
and again, no one's telling. I didn't read a book. I'm just winging this on my own. And like I talked to whoever I talked to, and bro, they would say to, I swear to God, dude, so weird. I would the first like 2 or 3 years, I have dozens of pictures. I'm not showing on this. I would take dirt, and when I meditated on a new moon, and I was known for it, but people thought I was batshit crazy. I would cover my face in dirt, and I didn't know why.
Yeah.
And I would have them tell me like, just do this, and it got so into it that I would even see these like witches. I would talk to them all over the world, and I had this one from Canada that was like, yo, let's make it a little bit more professional. So like we have like Yegasil, which is like the tree of life, which is like tattooed here. So up there, it's these ash trees, they're massive. So they would take ash. She would take ash and grind it out of Canada and send it to me. Go, here, use this now. It's a little bit better than fucking dirt. But I don't even know why I did that. And I just saying this, I'm like, dude, maybe that's why they were. I would just go outside. I would just put the dirt on my face, and I would put my shit on and do my thing. And I'm like, why am I doing this? And people would ask me, I said, I don't know why. Like, I just feel like they're telling me to do this. They're fucking weird, bro. That's so fucking weird.
I get it. No, so there's aspects of that, right? There's like again, in the Old Testament, they would throw on sackcloth and they'd go wailing and stuff like. They'd actually hire professionals to like do that too. Like that way, you still have to like tend to your flocks and stuff. I mean, you'd hire people who would actually go and continue the wailing and mourning periods and stuff. And there's multiple times throughout the course of the Bible where like, someone's going to their mourning period and they cover themselves in dirt, they put the sackcloth on. But it's not just that. So a lot of people will hear that like, you just have to live a trash. No, there's fasting and there's feasting, right? So Nativity is coming up. We're not doing a midnight service. At least I'm not attending a midnight service here. But Pascha, again, you call it Pascha, it's Easter. Easter is just Germanic word for it. But Pascha comes from Hebrew, which is Pesach. Pesach is Passover. We believe that Easter is, Christ's resurrection, death, burial, resurrection is the Passover replayed. That the Old Testament Passover was a prototype. It was a type that was fulfilled in Christ. So we carry over that name. We call it Pascha. You'll see that in Italian, in Spanish. Most of the Romance languages have kept Pascha as their word for it. So Pascha starts at 11:30 the night before, so Saturday night, and then we've been fasting for 48 days at that point. No animals, which, again, from a health perspective, I don't think is the best idea, but we're giving up something good for something better. But from there, that night, you go into a 3-hour service after that, and then it's just a raucous party. And people have brought their baskets, their Easter baskets or their Pascha baskets. I'll have like a pound of bacon in there, and I'll have multiple types of sausages.
I see. Just
sausages,
a binge after.
Steaks.
Yeah.
People bring out the whiskey, but people bring out that. We're not teetotalers, right? I mean, technically, my 3-year-old and my 1-year-old are drinking wine every week. So, I mean, we believe that's the body and blood of Christ, but at the end of the day, we don't believe they're distinct. That he is still maintaining everything. And in that moment, there's a mystical union to Christ, and we don't understand exactly from a logical level. I can't explain to you what that means. I can't. Because there's no way of understanding that supernatural aspect of it. Right. It's God himself. So if you're going to tell, we can't even understand what it would be like to be a bat or to be like a dog, right? Like, yeah, you think you know what your dog's thinking, but really, do you actually understand what it's like to be a dog? No, of course not. So you're going to tell me that you understand God's mind. Really? You really believe that? So it's the same idea there. What that means, and that's where Rome, that's where the Catholics get it wrong, is they think they have an understanding of what that Eucharist is, the transubstantiation. Like, God's molecules chance over here. And then Protestants came along. We're like, really? First of all, we don't know what molecules are in that sense right now. But even now that, 300 years later in the 1800s, when we started figuring out chemical compositions of stuff. Yeah, I don't necessarily believe that those chemicals changed from bread and wine. But that's still the actual, ontological, the real being of Christ in that bread and that wine at that moment. And that's the service itself. We were talking about chiral time, right? Before. So every service we go to that's a liturgy, it's actually, so that service, we believe we're entering into chiral time. We're not doing this in remembrance. We're celebrating the Lord's Supper. We're actually entering into his death, burial, resurrection every single Sunday. And every time we go there, we are entering into a spiritual, metaphysical reality. And it's not just Pastor Jim Bob or, Father Joe's sermon of the day and how is this going to improve my life? No, I am giving up that sacrifice, right? I'm giving up what little bit I can to God in praise right now, in this moment, entering into the eschaton, into a spiritual reality where I'm participating in it in that moment. And so,
interesting.
Yeah, we believe that we're actually living out the book of Revelation in that, which is a whole deeper rabbit hole. But yeah. So we are participating in that. We are participating in something that's much greater than ourselves. And yeah, we do actually, during the homily, we usually get some stuff that's more practical for living here in this world, because that's it. It's a yes and. That's the big difference, too, is most of our spirituality, even our dogmas, right, things we believe, it's, oh, well, Catholics say this, Protestants say this, we're arguing here. And we say yes and. Like, yes, we agree with both of you to a certain degree. Let's bring it back to that middle. And that's kind of it. We were isolated from all that. And I say that as somebody who came in. Last part on that, because you asked about the Greek and versus there's Russian Orthodox, or OCA. There's Antiochian, which is Lebanese, and so we all have the same church. We are all in the same community. I can go to any one of those churches, and it's going to be the same service, and I can participate as an active member. But the different little flavors are going to change that up, but it's the same thing. So. Yeah.
Did you ever? I read an article a long time. I still have it on my phone. I'm going to look it up. Where you mentioned how one of the biggest things I always had is what happened before 2,000 years ago, and you mentioned that he was kind of always there.
Yes.
Different timeline. Have you ever gone in the past back to Egyptian, Aztec, and all their followings were always born, or whatever the term is, on 12/25?
And like prominent figures, you mean?
Yeah, from Horus to, it goes back Well,
that's why I asked you about the reincarnation.
It's all, if you were blind, it was all Jesus.
Level,
just different fucking names.
So that's the zeitgeist kind of idea, yeah. So
that's the article I read. That's what it was called. The zeitgeist.
Yeah, well, because there was the documentary Zeitgeist that was big back in.
It was the sun, and then it was Ra, and then it was
but there's dozens of them.
What's interesting on that is the date for Sol Invictus, the Roman god, was done in response to Christianity. But in terms of that, so it goes back to our idea of breathing, right? Where I said, regardless whether you believe in air or not, it's still there, it's still holding it. Why am I to believe that if there is actually a God out there who's maintaining the universe, who's actually holding everything down, and he's holding logical patterns and everything? Like I said, you can't have logic without the Trinity. So I'm saying that's my bold claim right now. That without the Trinity itself existing, whether you choose to believe in him or not, or the three of them, or not, doesn't matter. My claim is that, no, they have to be there regardless. So if that is true, if the Logos is maintaining the reality everywhere, and people who may not have met him personally yet are observing the world because there's that logical pattern, why was that weird? If you talk about your moon cycles, the moon is going in a certain cycle. Yes, it's being maintained by Christ.
Right.
Whether you know that or not doesn't change that is still being maintained there. So if you are someone who doesn't know Jesus and you're trying to figure it out and you're grasping out, we refer to as the logos spermaticos, which is like the little seeds of truth that are out there. So you're reaching out there. So yes, I believe that those Egyptians, those Aztecs, all those people were grasping at a little bit of the truth.
But there's I had to look this up. It was like Horus, Attis, Krishna, Dionysus, Mithra. I don't know who any of these people are, but there's 40 of them, and everything is BC.
Right.
And someone said this to me, I'm like, what does that even mean? And now everything you're saying,
it goes back to what I was saying before about the mainstream idea of that the polytheism was being condensed.
Right.
No, there's a truth back there, and they're all grasping out at it.
Right.
It's the other way.
That became many.
Yes. So you saw
one that became many.
Give you the exact example of it. So the three wise men, right? There's the three guys, look up at the stars. They were magi. That's where the word magi comes from. They were Zoroastrian priests who were looking up in Persia, and well, one's from Persia, one's from India, and the other I think is from like Babylon areas, like Iraq kind of things, like Iraq, Iran, India. They're looking up at the stars. They were priest kings, and they were magi. They did not believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They were not ancient Israelites, but they saw the signs in the stars, and they came and traveled. And 2 years after Christ's birth, that's when they showed up and said, "Hey, we saw this.
Yeah.
This is real. Here's some gifts. Like this, it's not much because like I can tell you're something special. Here you go." But yeah, so even people who aren't explicitly worshiping Christ, or at least don't know to have that personal relationship with him yet, they're still reaching out there. And it goes back to that hole in the soul, right? And it's that the God-shaped hole in the human heart. And that's exactly what it comes down to. And that is ideas that came from Peterson. Like, he's grasping there. That's my biggest gripe with Peterson, okay? So, have you, again, without derail not too much, but so have you seen with Jonathan Pajot?
No.
He has a really close relationship with him. Pajot is an Orthodox icon carver and has since turned into the symbolic world. You'd be really interested in some of his videos and stuff, especially on that kind of thing, on the different religions stuff. He ties all that in together in a really way from an Orthodox perspective. Because so as an icon carver, so rather than like stained glass and like statues and stuff, we only do 2-dimensional, really like in-depth, but it's telling the story. And people are like, oh, well, Old Testament says no graven images, no worshiping idols. No worshiping idols. There is a difference. The actual Greek word for image, like we're made in the image of God, is ikonos. It's icon. So every time you have that, it's icon. What's on your phone, right? You have icons on your phone. The words themselves, icon is just a picture representation of something. The Bible itself is a picture representation of something that you're trying to understand. So it gets into a really squirrely territory with Protestants who don't like idols in terms of icons. If you were a non-literate population, you didn't know how to read, you either had to just go to the church and listen to what was being told to you, which is a major part of it.
Or look at pictures of something.
Right. Or you look at the pictures and you're understanding it.
Right.
So there's depictions of the biblical stuff, but there's also depictions of the saints who have died to pass that. And people start to get like squirrely with, oh, you're worshiping dead people. Well, to that point, again, this is not where I expected all this to go. But okay, saint is, again, sanctum is the Latin word from Greek agios. So you've heard the Hagia Sophia is a...
Oh, yeah. It's a good song.
Yeah.
I play it in my car.
There you go. So Hagia Sophia is wisdom. So Hagia is holy. So holy wisdom. Hagia is saint. So a saint is just someone who's a holy person, right? What's a holy person? Someone who's lived their life like Christ. How do you live life like Christ? Well, you pick up your cross, you follow him. How do you do that? Well, you fast, you pray, you give alms. You love the Lord God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself.
Yep.
And the practical way of doing that is that fasting, prayer, almsgiving. So
I love that so much.
So you improve your health, but you also are improving the world around you.
That's fucking awesome.
Before we move on, the return of Christ, is it Christ in the flesh, or is it the Christ consciousness, or
no? Yeah. So that's again. So it's funny, right? That's part of why I was so explicit when I changed my thesis. Like, again, from a physical perspective, I still have that same thesis, that same theory mentally. My heuristic, like my framework for understanding physical health, is still that over/under reaction. Mm-hmm. And I still believe in the importance of the microbiome and getting in sufficient vitamins and minerals. Again, these are all things we could talk about too.
Yeah, I want to say this for a whole other episode. I was just going to finish this.
Right, exactly. Exactly. No, I get it.
I thought we were going to go down like fucking parasites and all those shit.
Right,
We'll save that for another day.
Right.
Yeah.
And all things I'm deeply interested in as well.
But all that comes from your spiritual breakdown, like it.
So all of that,
like how did all this spirituality, right, of the Orthodox, how did that project into the actual health of it?
So that's what it is. Is that so?
Because your clips online are wild, bro. They're all over the place. And every fucking clip, I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. All the Q&As that you do.
Yes. So all of those,
I can watch them for hours.
All of that predates my spiritual stuff. Let's be very clear.
Okay.
However, the vast majority of it, I don't think contradicts my spiritual stuff.
Right.
except when we start diving into the yoga, meditation, the fasting itself. I think there's benefits to it from a physiological perspective. But when I start to look at what you're actually doing, it gets way too squirrely for me. I'm like, nope, not touching that.
Yeah.
Same thing. Again, I cheated. I listened to the psychedelic episode. I think that they exist for a reason. They are here for a reason. But it goes back to the first commandment, right? Of don't eat that. They're there. They are letting you into that noetic realm. And there may have been a time where, had we been spiritually awakened and actually like in tune and knowing where to direct yourself, they'd have their purpose. And maybe you are at rock bottom. Again, talking about like the purpose of this podcast, you're at rock bottom and maybe you have PTSD from military, right? You know, and you're coming back and you're about to end it. Yeah, that microdose might bring you back to the point that you can rechannel yourself. Right. If that was the last step you needed. But most people who are going to be doing it are going to be jumping into some really deep waters they were not prepared for.
I agree.
Yeah, I'm really reluctant to advise it sometimes. Most of the time.
I'd recommend, so Jonathan Pezio is one, but Church of the Eternal Logos. Okay, David Patrick Harry was a big psychonaut, and he's like finishing his PhD over at Berkeley. So like in the heart of like Timothy Leary, like that realm from back in the day. And he became an Orthodox Christian, and similar kind of thing though. He got that way through the psychonaut route, and he had a very successful channel dedicated to that stuff, and just shelved it completely and rebuilt his brand as an Orthodox Christian. And yeah, I think you guys would be kind of interested in that one
for sure.
But yeah, so I think with that kind of stuff, you're delving into areas that we're not ready for. Right. It would be like, again, using like a lifting analogy. Like I used the baby's food before, like a lifting analogy, right? It's your first day in the gym. You're not going to start like pushing 450.
Right.
In any direction, any plane. You're not going to be able to do all this. You're not going to run 50 miles on that first day. You're going to build your way. And that goes back to, with the fasting, with all of that, you're continually building yourself towards God. And we take those periods throughout the course of the year, those fasting periods, as a time to reset and redirect ourselves. It's for spiritual warfare. Yeah.
What about the consciousness, the return?
Right. So that's what I was going to say. So that's how we got sidetracked there. Right. No, thank you. I appreciate that. So pulling back at that thread. So that's how I landed into, because in the worlds that I delved into health-wise, right, there's a lot of the crystal stuff. There's a lot of the yogas, a lot of the meditation. And there's a lot of energy work. And I don't disagree that it's real. But that new age stuff is still directing you into a wide net versus circling you back in.
I see that, yeah.
So one other little distinction on the Orthodox theology versus what more Western thoughts, again, Roman Catholic and Protestant, is the essence-energy distinction. Like, what the hell does that mean, right? So the essence of God is who he is, starting with the person, the Father, Son, Spirit. The energies are his actions in the world. Grace, love, mercy, just maintaining the world itself. We don't ever know God in his essence. Going back to Moses, we never see him face to face in that sense. We never see the Father.
Right. No image for him.
Allow me to clarify. We never see the Father's face.
Right.
We can see the Son's face. We can see Jesus' face.
Right.
But we never really know, even then. Like right now, we're in this room together, we're talking, and, oh, I know your essence. No, I don't.
Right.
I know your actions. I know your energies. I know how you behave, how you conduct yourselves in the world. That's how we know God. We have a personal relationship with him through his energies, through his mercy, his justice, his love, his grace, all the different attributes of things that he's doing in, for, and you and for the world itself. We know it through that means. And so we know the energies. And those energies, while not only including those same energies that you're tapping into in those other modalities, are an aspect thereof. So, to the Christ consciousness idea, yes, but I would lean that more towards the Holy Spirit.
Right, yeah. Okay.
It would be the Spirit leading you in a certain direction, but we do believe that the physical reality of Christ coming back is true.
As well.
So the bodily resurrection is a big thing. That was a big stumbling block.
Like the body physically coming out of, like coming off the cross, or just like a metaphor of the Holy Spirit?
No, I believe that we're going to be bodily in the resurrection. So
Like he could be walking,
Jesus
like he could be
himself will
walking
be-
around
yes,
the
yes.
so
streets.
in the New Testament and in the Acts of in the New Testament portions, so in the Gospels and the Acts of the Apostles, when Christ is walking around, he's actually walking around. In the West, they call him Doubting Thomas.
Is that after? That's after his resurrection.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he's actually walking around. Thomas.
He's like in the garden, right?
Yep.
And Mary doesn't know who he is. And
Yep. So yeah, like and at another point, there's the road to Emmaus where there's two who are walking, and I'm blanking out which two, but Lord forgive me. But yeah, so those two are walking along, and they're literally walking with Christ, but they don't realize it at that moment. And they get to their location, and he's gone, and they realize, oh wow. So Doubting Thomas is what they call him in the West, because Jesus tells him to poke the finger into his holes, because the holes from where he was pierced by the spear are still there, and reaching on in and feeling that he's sitting there eating with them. So in the eschaton, in the after the second coming, we do believe that there's going to be an actual second coming, and we're going to be even the people. So what we actually know about the second coming, afterlife, time, all of that, there's some who believe that we are already, that those who have passed are already there. Okay, this is going to kind of circle back to I meant to say this before with what about those people before that period, right? So in Orthodox theology, on Holy Saturday, we believe that Christ had descended down to Hades. So the icons, and that's where I was going with that, I think, before. There's an icon of Christ literally kicking down, like he's like the Kool-Aid man,
The devil.
the gates of hell.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and smashing it, and then underneath it, there's a skull, and it's the skull of Golgotha, which is where he was crucified, but it's also Adam's skull. It's a whole deep theology to it. So the gates of hell, the harrowing of Hades, he's down there preaching to those who passed before he came into the world. And it's not canonical. It's not like we know this for sure, but there's a lot of people, especially in the Greek world, because the Greeks really want to recycle or rehabilitate some of their philosophers like Plato, Socrates, Aristotle. It's small T tradition. They believe that Plato was the first to accept Christ, because if you look at what he believed and everything, like, oh yeah, no, Plato, yep, nope. He believed, he heard it, and he was like, yep, I'm in. I don't know. I'm not calling Plato a saint, but there's belief of that. There's there's an interesting book called Christ the Eternal Tao, and it's written almost as if there was it was a New Testament to Tao Te Ching. Mm-hmm. And if you look at it, the way they conceptualize, there's the wind, there's the I haven't read that in so long, but it's the way. Yeah, so the way
which
is like
the Tao.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So in Christianity, one of the first things they were called was the people who follow the way. Mm-hmm. So
Which was, I think, the Essenes.
Yeah.
Were like,
they did have that though as well. Yes. The Essenes, though, they still were a different sect. They weren't the proto-Christians. I know that there's that thought of the 33 AD you were talking about before, right? Those missing years.
Right.
Yeah. So the Essenes had a very similar kind of mindset. We actually believe that that Jesus went to India.
Yeah, that's
Right. I understand that, but not the other way around. It's not that yoga was taught to Jesus.
correct. I think
yeah.
actually do you ever read Jesus and the Essenes by Dolores Cannon?
That's the book I was talking about.
So that was
Right.
a channel,
That's what I was
talking
channel
about.
text, but
Yeah,
it was I don't know, a Nazarene or something
Yeah.
around the time, and they asked this person that they were channeling, like,
Yeah.
are you, did you teach Jesus? And his response was really beautiful. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was something like, we kind of taught him what he already knows. We kind of showed him, like he already has these,
Right.
he was prophesied by the stars, and this guy, they knew he was it. He was the guy that everyone had been waiting for.
Right.
And they knew that he was,
Well,
a
wouldn't
son
that
of
be
God.
what Jesus is those years? Because if he left basically a Jew, and then he came back, that he got crucified for, it's what he learned in that gap.
Yeah, which is supposed
that
to
he's
be what
kind of
Christianity
regurgitating
was.
now.
It's supposed to be what Christianity
So
is.
when you look at it that way, it makes sense
to that
to
question,
me.
though, he was already performing miracles when he was a teenager, a preteen. Because the very first miracle, and quick little shot at teetotalers like the Protestants who were like, no alcohol, none of this. The very first, I love to say that one. What's the very first miracle Christ ever does? He turns water into wine. He's at a wedding. They're running out of wine. And his mother, once again, sorry, Protestants, but she comes and asks him, because the will of the mother has a lot to say. You're going to listen to your mom mostly. And so she comes to him and says, hey, this party is kind of dying off. The people are getting real sad. Like, you need to help them out here. And she's like, it's not time yet. It's not time yet. It's not time yet. He's also in the synagogues reading and like basically preaching at preteen age. Like he disappears for a bit, and Joseph and Mary are looking for him. Like, what happened to Jesus? Where's he at? He's in the synagogue preaching already at that age. So that's where I would take issue with he went over there and he already knew that. Well, yeah, he already knew it because he is God. So it's he's both fully man, fully God. Like he always was.
I just
God.
look at him like this guy that they knew since he was 5 or 10 years old that the things that this guy was saying was just he's just so far ahead of everybody else's understanding.
But it's even more than that. It's from birth. It's from the.
But
it actually goes even further back than that. So
to like Isaiah and things where they were prophesizing predecessors to the one that was going to deliver.
People recognizing who he was. So his cousin John the Baptist is in the womb in Elizabeth's womb and leaps for joy, which is actually a reference to David leaping for joy when the ark was returned. But
David and Goliath. David.
So David, King David, what is the archetype for
That's so cool how it just goes
for what a Messiah is. He's the archetype. So and Jesus is from the line of David. So he is. I can go on such tangents on the giant part. We can come back to that in a second, actually, because that's a real fun one. But so Dave,
I know you would love it because I was reading some Enoch stuff recently. They were talking about the Watchers and Giants.
I believe in the Giants.
That was their history. That this stuff was all real.
If you go into like the hieroglyphics, like they dug them up, and I believe to even further it, like if you watch, I think it was called Moana.
I was gonna say we were
like at the end of Moana. That woman sleeping God is a sleeping mountain. Like I believe that's real, dude. Like that's
we can
like
definitely
grave sites for giants.
But anyway,
but I feel like they put it in your face by doing Mount Rushmore. I think that's like where they like, yo, we do this. This is real. Here it is, like in your face.
So
fuck.
So John the Baptist, St. John leaps through in the womb. St. Simeon and St. Anna show up when he's born. First, the shepherds themselves, the angels proclaim his glory from heaven. Then, when he's circumcised and brought to the temple, Simeon and Anna, he's been waiting there for the Messiah to come his whole life. He's been waiting for like 80 years to show up, and he showed up. Oh man, it's gonna kill me now because again, I say it every week. Literally said it yesterday. My Lord, now let thy servant depart in peace, for I've seen the glory of thy salvation. Is what Simeon says, and that's in the Bible, but we say that as a prayer. So Lord, now let thy servant, at the end of the service, is Lord, now let thy servant depart in peace, because I've seen the glory of thy salvation. And that shows up when he's like 8 days old. So this dude's been waiting there for.
And the guy's like, I can die happy now. I've seen it.
He's like 60-year-old man saying like, all right, I'm good. Like you can take me now, God. Like, because I saw this baby getting circumcised. Like, what? Like just on the surface. So there's the incredulity test of a lot of things in the Bible where you're like, why is that still there? If you're trying to really sell me on this, if it's just the used car salesman aspect, why is that there? Like, it doesn't make sense. There's a lot of things like that where it's like, all right, no, okay, keep going. But so birth, pre-birth, stars in the sky. So it was known that this was something special before then. And it wasn't just, all right, now I'm 30 years old, let's go. I finally paid off my college debt. Like let's go. It was established long before that. Right, there was the prophecies that foretold of him before that, but even his earthly life, no, I don't think that there was he went away. With the India thing, so St. Thomas, Doubting Thomas. So they're called the St. Thomas Christians in India today. Like it's, from our perspective, they're a heretical branch. They don't believe the same things we believe, but they are a very old branch of Christianity. Churches dating back to.
This is based on the Gospel of Thomas.
So not the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas. No,
okay. So I was reading that recently.
So we don't accept that one as being valid.
Okay.
Because it does get into a little bit more of the New Age type stuff. Mm-hmm. Right. So we move away there though, but it's the people who ended up in that area were people who were converted by Thomas. And we believe that our prayer ritual is a foundation to yoga. That's a much more deeper kind of thing. So for me, it's like, I'm going back to that yoga stuff, but I think we gave it to him anyway.
Does the yoga have anything to do with shapes and geometry and things like that?
There's a level to that, yes. No, yeah, there's definitely, so our bodies, again, I believe our bodies are designed a specific way. There's certain patterns to it. Even before I was Orthodox, I used to rag on yoga anyway, because I would just say it's movement patterns with fancy Indian names.
Right. From a very like physical lens of like what's going on with the body.
Right.
Here,
like, it's like, right. Like, they're
what kind of stretching is going on here, and
Exactly.
which anatomical positions are they hitting to lengthen which muscles and so on and so forth.
Right. So there's definitely structural math and geometry there. But I always gave.
But I mean, in a sense of shapes, like more sacred shapes and things like that. Are we putting ourselves in this perfect triangle that helps spiral energy up, or things like that? Kundalini and.
So that gets into the Platonic ideas, right? Like the forms and everything. There definitely is something to that, but it's an area where I'm just like.
What's your lens on like what when you say yoga? You keep saying yoga in your thesis. Like what kind of box are you putting yoga in?
I'm putting yoga into physical rituals that are going to be invoking demons, essentially.
Does
like
it have
any
to be
class
demons?
with a mat, like any yoga class with a mat.
Pretty much. So to that point, does Yogi Susan's, who's done 200 course hours and does it on the corner of the strip mall, is she going to be someone who's bringing somebody to Satan?
But sometimes you're programmed. You talked about this in one of your podcasts I was listening to.
Yeah.
But sometimes you're programmed to think you're doing good.
Yes.
And you're really doing bad. For example, like. And we're going to do this all next. We're doing another episode soon. We'll go down the health route. But like, let's just say, for example, they push vegetable oils and canola oils. But a doctor will tell you that, and there's the studies from 1962 and all these other studies about high fat or and now you go down the oil route and you find out it was a fucking diesel lubricant during World War II, and they can only make money on it, so they start cooking with it. But I've talked to a doctor who literally thinks that it's okay, and like, bro, my LDL, I don't go on any medication, and I've had LDL levels of 300 to 350, and it was normal up until fucking 1960 when they made statins. So those are all like your norms, because you're programmed to think it's normal.
Correct.
So that means that no matter who is, and I believe you only know what you physically experience in life. Everything else is you've read someone else's idea. So you're kind of saying like that whole aspect in the yoga is like, well, I read this book and I read this book, but the basis of it 50,000 fucking years ago, the programming has been, it's good, but it's really behind the scenes. Like, I feel like spelling is like these, I feel like these Super Bowl performances and like, you don't think it's weird that Beyonce on Christmas, the Catholic day, who's the head fucking demon in the world, we'll get into that one day, is going to perform her performance on Christmas? Like, that's a big. So now you have millions of people like, oh my God, Beyonce, I love you, bro. That's a satanic fucking ritual she's doing on Christmas. It's the biggest slap in the face you can to any spiritual person. And you talk to 90% of the people, and they're gonna think 95% of them think you're batshit crazy. So you're kind of saying that yoga is kind of the same thing of like they're programmed. Everyone thinks it's this. Ooh, wow, this is cool, but it's pre-programmed of like satanic shit.
Yeah. So Susan, the yogi, isn't probably going to send you to hell.
Right, but that's what she was taught, and now she's putting out those vibes there.
You might be the person. Not every person that goes and does their yoga is the person that's going to delve deeper.
Right, but it might happen 1 out of 100.
How many of those do you know? Right, you know that girl who ended up going to India to go to the retreat and learn all about this, and now they're the super guru. They got on some really weird rabbit holes. If you look down, how many on Netflix? How many cults? You see, like, Swami Vivekananda over here said X, Y, and Z, and it's a real. So
that's fucking.
It's like the Bikram guys like assaulting women and shit.
Exactly.
At the same time.
So
it's like Catholicism all over again.
Right. So Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future. I said that was a title. That one is a really cool one. So Saint Seraphim Rose, not officially canonized, but. We're not, so Catholics believe that you have to like go top down. You got to always, we tell you who's a saint, who's not.
Right.
We have officially canonized people who are recognized officially by church, but we also have local veneration. Like, so there's a grassroots effort as well. So for us, if there's somebody who's relatively confident on, and you can't just start like, I'm going to start, I don't know, Trump or Biden, I'm going to start, he's a saint. I don't care. Like, no, that's a different thing.
Right.
You actually have to have a process and whatever. So Father Seraphim Rose, Saint Seraphim, wrote that one. He wrote his work was used for Christ the Eternal Tao. It was one of his spiritual sons. And his book Nihilism is what actually got me to Orthodoxy. But I'll finish that thought in a second. So Saint Seraphim, though, his Orthodox religion in the future. He grew up in the 60s in California, in the Bay Area, was part of the counterculture, studied under Alan Watt. Like, he was a psychonaut, like, knew all this stuff, was studying at Berkeley ancient Chinese so that he could be the first one to translate the Tao Te Ching into English. And like from the ancient manuscripts, not just like, the Cliff Notes version that you got maybe was kind of right. No, he like was like in deep. And eventually, without getting too deep down that whole story, became an Orthodox monk and started like his own, with blessings and stuff. We do self-hierarchy, but helped found a new monastery, and his stuff was getting like smuggled into the Soviet Union because Russia is a traditionally Orthodox country, and it was getting smuggled there and was like reigniting the faith over there. And you ask most American converts, and they're going to tell you, nope, Saint Seraphim was a big part of it. Yeah. And so he was steeped in that culture. Orthodoxy and the religion of the future is kind of like a conspiracy text in the sense that he was outlining with psychedelics, with the yoga, with the other religious movements, charismatic, so Pentecostal, even Protestant movements like that, the UFO stuff. He was actually delving into that. And all of those things, how they are all part of the same development towards a one world religion kind of idea. So they're all aspects of it. And while people hear that and they're like, oh, or even one world government, all those things like, oh, well, oh, you're being racist or anti-Semitic, or you're doing this or you're that. And there's a power behind that. There's that level of what's directing those forces. And it's not flesh and blood.
I feel we're going through that right now, though, even with the election and Kennedy coming back and taking beef tallow back in McDonald's and putting God back into school. And I feel like you're seeing, someone from the 80s who saw the peak and the crash. And now I see it coming back as like the good guys are making a comeback. And
God will, that's the case. Yeah. It's one of those where I didn't like the way that there was almost a messianic figure applied to Trump throughout the last 8 years. But
if you take him out of it, though, as a source.
To the degree that he's bringing stuff health related, everything else, I'm very much on board. Like all those things. It's actually kind of funny. I tried to write RFK in 2020 only because the Operation Warp Speed stuff, I couldn't bring myself to pull the trigger for Trump. Tried to write him in. Arkansas, you're not allowed to write in. But then when RFK was running, I'm like, all right, cool. But like, I kind of, you're not going to get it. So like, but if we can get you in, otherwise, I'm in. Yeah. So for health purposes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I do think that rulers are put into their place for a reason. So
through being groomed by people or through a higher power?
Yes.
Both.
Yes, and it has to do with our understanding of suffering. So you're going to suffer one way or another. It's whether you voluntarily choose to do it or not. And certain times things are placed in your life. They're kind of stumbling blocks. But are you going to roll with it? Or are you going to actually...
or stumble.
Yeah. Right. And so the idea is to kind of roll with it and voluntarily choose your sufferings. And maybe you'll experience less external sufferings if you can pick up more of your cross and carry it with you. It's kind of the idea.
Yeah.
So on the world level, I mean, I really don't think elections really do much of anything.
Right.
Regardless of what one believes about what happened in any previous ones.
But I do feel like we're on the up and up.
Yes.
Of whatever is controlling.
And even that, I don't know how much you're into, you mentioned like Zoroastrians and things like that. Even that seems like it's maybe written into our cycle where now we're entering that age of moving into the heart and moving into better things and the age of information and...
Look, how do you go down that one? From my perspective, what it comes down to for me on that is the only thing I can change. I can't control what's happening on a geopolitical level. I can't control what's going on a national level. I can't control all of that stuff. What I can control is me.
You can love God and love your neighbor. And
exactly.
That's it, right?
And pray that through that if every one of us did the same thing, we actually could ground up, kind of like that same idea, ground up towards
our collective consciousness could.
Right. And to that degree, I do believe there is a collective consciousness. A Christ consciousness could be a good way of describing that, yes. But I don't mean it in the same way that Christ consciousness is
That
used.
it is. Yeah, I see.
Right. So the Logos does withhold everything. Everything is been maintained in Christ, in the Logos. But I don't mean the same thing that a New Ager does. And that's why I had to kind of go like full sidebar
Yeah, no,
on
I like that a lot. Do we have intro or extraterrestrials working with us, or
That would lean
against
towards
us,
with the drones and everything, right?
yeah?
So that going to Orthodox religion in the future, there's 3 ways that he looks at the alien phenomena, right? And so it's either, or it's some combination of advanced tech that we don't understand. It's interdimensionals,
So
demons,
I'm a interdimensional fan. That's what I think it is.
demons,
Yeah.
and or just something playing tricks on your eyes. It could be a combination of all 3. It's not. Yeah, they're not mutually exclusive. And could those interdimensionals be talking to? Yeah, absolutely. And that circles back to you talking about giants, right? So, techne, arts, all of that, technology. It means like a way of doing things. And so, with the flood, they talk about how
This is the flood with Noah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so with the flood, they talk about how there were giants in that day, the Nephilim.
Ozark, yeah.
Right. So you were talking about reading Enoch and everything. Enoch, Jubilees, the Book of the Watchers, all of those are Second Temple period texts that we don't believe they're divinely inspired, but they're not things that you can't read. They're things to be, what Apocrypha actually meant was something to be read privately, read in the home.
Interesting.
So
Was Enoch taken by God?
So Enoch was translated as the word. That's only happened 2 other times. It's Elijah in the chariot of fire was translated. So those are the only 2 people that we know of who didn't die. And then there's the Dormition of the Theotokos, which is the falling asleep of the Mother of God. So Mary, Catholics believe that she never died. We believe she died. She fell asleep in the Lord.
Mary,
But-
Jesus' mother.
Correct.
Yeah.
But we believe that she was taken. She was translated as well after her death. Much deeper rabbit hole. But to that point, Enoch was translated. He does not show. So in Revelation, it talks about how there's 2 witnesses who are supposed to come back who are supposed to convert the Jews. And they're not named. So traditionally, though, we believe it's either Elijah and Moses, or because there is a extra canonical book about the translation of Moses, his body, that the Archangel Michael is fighting with Satan over his body. So if you've gone down some of those, those other texts that didn't make it into the Bible, you may have come across that one at some point. But yeah, so the translation with Enoch, the other person though, Elijah is definitely always one of them. It's either Elijah and Moses or Elijah and Enoch are thought to be the 2 who are supposed to come back to convert the Jews before Second Coming. But circling back from there, with the Nephilim, there were giants in that day. Giant doesn't only mean Moana's mountain god. It doesn't only mean a large person. It's more of like a tyrant, a strong man.
Right.
You
There's
know,
like an energy of
like
these people.
You're right. Like,
Yeah. That's how it was with
Venezuelan strongman Miguel Noriega kind of idea, right? Or right now he's toppled Assad, right? Oh, he's a strongman. He was a tyrant. He was a giant in those days.
Right.
And there's a level to that where it's, sometimes they are big, Goliath, and then there's Ong. So there's Ong, or Og, that's what it is. Og is a giant who they talk about his bed and how big it was. And like, oh, well, he must have been 12 feet tall. Well, not exactly. It was really more of a, shall we say, Epstein-style bed. So it was a ritual bed because back then, sexual practices were intimately tied into your religious worship.
Interesting.
And so you're invoking things through sexual magic is kind of the idea there, those rituals. So those giants, they were performing rituals, doing a whole bunch of weird stuff, Goliath being the last of those giants. And the last one that's named in the Bible, at least. Doesn't mean there can't be more giants, like more actual giants. So the spirit of Antichrist is those giants going on there. So much deeper rabbit hole. Lord of Spirits and Michael Heiser, Unseen Warfare. He's a Protestant, but he gets a lot of things right. But Lord of Spirits is 2 Orthodox priests discussing like a whole bunch of craziness on the Nephilim, Enoch. Their title, Lord of Spirits, comes from 1 Enoch chapter 6, I think it is. Yeah, where Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the Trinity, is referred to as the Lord of Spirits. Because those spirits, those ones who are watching over the nations, is the one that's referenced.
Yeah,
So
interesting.
So so Enoch is expands on. So if you read Genesis 6, it's the first 4 lines are like, oh, there's giants in those days, and then God came down and he flooded the earth, and you're like, cool. What does
I think
that
it
mean?
even said the giants were like taking wives and shit.
Right. And so that's a big debate whether the sons of men and the sons of men and daughters of Eve, and what does that mean? So some believe it's demons, some believe it. Like, that's where that ritual aspect comes in. So if you look at the Numa Galish, you look at all Epic Gilgamesh, all those, you look at all those different stories we're talking about, right? If you look into those and you see those gods, whether it's Hercules in the Greeks or it's I can't who was it Marduk in the Babylonians. There was somebody who was like the sun who was supposed to be fighting, and that was all those gods, right? If you look at how they came into the demigod type person, how they come into the world is, there was this one god who was this level, and they mated with a human woman, and all of a sudden now there's this half human kind of person here. And most of them, though, refer to him as being 2/3 divine. How does that work? Well, there was your king, who was already regarded as divine, as an incarnation, as a hypostasis of the god, and then you had this actual demon show up, invoking there, and because they're performing this ritual magic, and then you have the human woman, so now they're 2/3 divine. Again, definitely not. Didn't think I was going down a Lord of Spirits tangent today, but didn't think I was going down this tangent. So with that, you now have these creations, these humans who are, if you were to go back there with a film camera, if we were to tape the podcast back there, somehow go back in time there, you would just see an Epstein situation. You'd see just conjugal relations. You would be seeing a demon with horns showing up.
Right.
And even those giants who were created in the process, you're not going to see an actual
30-foot
Interesting.
thing.
Right.
What is that energy?
It's the energy that's being transferred there and what you are manifesting, what you're invoking in there.
Right.
That's the big difference between religion, between like spiritual practice and magic is, what am I directing it towards? Right. Even, again, going back to like meditation stuff, right? I'm emptying my cup and then I have to refill it. Well, whether it's empty or not, you have to refill it with something. What are you refilling it with? And if you're not refilling it with Christ, then there's a whole bunch of different things that can enter there. And literally a whole bunch of things. Yeah. So either you're going Lord of Spirits or any of those other little
anything
spirits.
else. Yeah.
What about the ages? Biblical ages? What's your take on that?
What, like a dispensationalist kind of thing?
Do we really live, several hundred years, or
I do.
Now are we far from God, and that's why we're living shorter? Or?
Here, since y'all expected me to be coming in talking about health in the first place, right? So that I do think that has to do with the fact that over time we're getting progressively worse. I think that when we were created before the fall, we weren't created perfect. We were still supposed to be advancing forward. Even then, we were created without issue, though, without flaw. So as we progressively moved on, as we had more and more, we had more telomere damage. We had more exposure, more oxidative stress, more different things in the world. So as we got further into the world, we've had more collective stressors that have in turn shortened our lifespans. But in terms of that, I do think that it was a couple hundred years.
Yeah. I think now that provides a really big obstacle for us because it's so hard to learn and ascend spiritually in this short 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 year span. And when you were getting several hundred years to do so, it was...
And so for our purpose, we don't believe that it ends. It's not, hey, you were... So St. Paul, who wrote most of the letters in the New Testament, says at one point that I was saved, I am saved, I am being saved. So, you ask an average Protestant, they're going to tell you, I was saved on... And they can tell you the exact time and what day it was. They can tell you what they were wearing. Like, I was saved on this day and da-da-da. Mm-hmm. No, I believe I was saved the day I was baptized and received into the church. I believe I'm actively being saved by trying and failing often to live my life like Christ. I believe that in the eschaton, I will be saved, God willing. I have no assurance of my salvation. Mm-hmm. But what does that salvation mean? It's me continually growing and turning myself toward Christ. Mm-hmm. And in turn towards the Father.
So you kind of brought up like Judgment Day almost. Mm-hmm. Is there heaven or hell, or is that on earth?
So, is there hell here on earth?
Is that
no?
Referenced?
That was my response. Is there hell here on earth?
Are you asking?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you think people go again? Based on the theory of what I understand of the podcast, what do you believe that people can go experience hell here?
Can they experience it here? Yeah, I would say
Exactly.
yes. Yeah.
Right. So that's my answer then.
Can they experience it after in a place?
So that's my answer. I'm getting there. So hell and heaven aren't necessarily places because God encompasses all things. He is everywhere. He fills all things. Can't be anywhere God's not. So
Right, omnipotent, omnipresent.
exactly.
Omniscient.
So to that point, it's you've kept turning yourself away. You're running as far away as you can. Sure, you're over there, but you're still in front of God. So for us, that is, again, I was saying before how there's different understandings, a lot of different things, but on heaven and hell, both heaven and hell are your personal experience of the divine light. So Christ, or the Father, so it is putting out that energy, the essence energies, putting out those energies of his life. It's his love. So to give you the poorest analogy, but it's the one that's most often used by the fathers, the church fathers, is the sun, right? So you out in the sun, it can be
The sun,
like
the world sun, yeah. The yellow sun.
Good call. Yeah, thank you for clarification. Yes, sun. You go out go to the beach, go into the sun. It's invigorating. It's giving you energy. Everything's great. You stay in there too long, you start burning up. Or you stay in there long once, and then you go out the next time. Now you're really burning up. It can be both a source of life and giving you all the energy in the world, or it can be a torturous experience. And so if you have continually turned yourself away from him, just think of the goth emo kid, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, I hate everything in the world. I'm super nihilist. I hate everything. So if you continue to turn yourself away, that experience is going to be a crushing burden on you versus I want to direct myself towards him and I am choosing you. So I'm coming back to you. So it's either a loving or it's horror, it's torture, but it's your own choice. So I made that point by Peterson before. That's why what bugs me the most. His two favorite writers that he sources all the time are beyond Carl Jung, are Dostoevsky and Solzhenitsyn, both of whom are Orthodox Christians. Good friend Pajot, Orthodox Christian. Like, you're so close, man. Like you there. So Alexander Solzhenitsyn has this quote that which he borrowed from a French guy, but whatever. But I like it from Solzhenitsyn. Is the line between good and evil is in each human man's heart. So whether you decide to turn your life back towards God or not, and that the reason why that was important is. So Solzhenitsyn, his most famous work was the Gulag Archipelago, where he surveyed all the gulags, the basically concentration camps of the Soviets, and the people who were best adapted to that were Christians and Jews for that matter, but the people who had a really deep religious faith, who were able to find something meaner to fill that God-sized hole in their heart. And so what he learned there, though, was that the people that were on either side of that interaction could have very easily gone the other way. And if you look at some of the, U.S. experiments, Stanford experiments and stuff, where the prison experiments.
Right, the power.
Right, where you could very easily flip that switch.
That was something I appreciated about Jordan Peterson a lot when I initially learned about him was like, Trump was big at the time. He was very hated at the time. And he would say, you're in him.
Yes.
And Hitler, you're in him.
Yes.
What makes you think that you could never be that?
Exactly.
We're on our pedestal of
exactly.
That guy has the worst qualities and none of them are in me and I could never be him. And he's like, no, you can be. And I think religion brings that back to like, you are him kind
exactly.
of, like.
And so when it comes back to that of heaven, hell, end your life, everything else, it's your choice. What do you choose? And so are you going to give yourself back to him or are you going to turn yourself away? And that's what it comes down to for me. And that's the Orthodox perspective is that, no, you have every much to say. And you're going to stumble. You're going to fall. But you got to pick yourself back up. You got to knock down 9 times, get up 10.
If you turn from him and you live this whole incarnation far from him and then you die, do you get another chance to do it again?
No. One and done.
Interesting.
Yep. One and done.
Yeah, this has been a really, really good conversation. We'll start to wrap it up.
Yeah. I think it's good.
I wanted to talk
My
about.
wife is going to kill me because she's like, oh, you're going to talk health,
Yeah,
right?
we were planning on a little 45-minute health talk, and it turned into 2 hours of Jesus.
This is going to come out on Christmas, so Merry Christmas.
This has been my.
That's weird. That's perfect timing.
My favorite conversation
Perfect
so
Christmas.
far, and you're in Arkansas now, correct?
I
Yeah.
am.
So I think next time probably won't be in person, but I would love to try to get into more of the health stuff that we planned on.
But I'm sure it's going to
even some more of this would be as I continue to dive into it as well would be really cool.
Yeah.
And I invite y'all to check out a service one time. Check out our Orthodox service.
Nice, yeah,
Pop
I
on
love
down.
that. All right. Well,
You said, he said, we're Father Demetrios.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll say what's up till next game. I think it's next Tuesday.
all right. Yeah. This will come out on Christmas. So happy holidays. Thanks for watching. Thanks,
Thank you, bro. Appreciate your time.
Mike Kuhn, Dr. Mike,
Goodbye.
coming
Christ
down.
is born.
Do you want to plug any of your? I don't know.
Yeah.
I know we mentioned previously you were really up on YouTube Q&As and all these things, and then you've taken on a new sort of path now. Are you still really active on that stuff?
So
or?
I should be. I've been looking. I'm thinking 2025 might be the year I'm going to really
Come back
into it. Yeah, I've kind of been in a in between phase where I'm like, I don't know how to articulate what I want in the shorter format, and so definitely gonna be putting more content out there. For now, head on over to at Dr. Michael Christian on Instagram. It's
And we'll tag you on here too.
Yep, Dr. Michael Christian's also the name, but it's Orthodox Health is on YouTube. It has all my back catalog.
Orthodox Health. That's cool.
Yep, it's all the back catalog there, and God willing, I'll be putting a whole bunch more out there, and you'll be seeing me soon. Cool. And anything else, you can reach out to me through those formats if you want to work with me. Anything health related.
Yeah, I was going to say, he's very knowledgeable on health. I promise
I promise you, we can talk
some
about health
really,
stuff.
some really
just as
cool
mind blown
answers.
as you are with the religion stuff. I'm going to be mind blown with the health stuff.
Absolutely,
to me, it was just crazy of what I've experienced. So, all right. See you guys on the next one.
Signing out.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Will you be absolutely genuine with me? No deception, please. I want you to do something that expresses you without the slightest deception.